Hi there and welcome back to my channel. For those new, my name's Nicki, I'm an author and editor and I post videos here on YouTube about writing, editing, reading and all the things I love. Today we're here for another crash course in the classics and we're talking about Elizabeth Gaskell. Now Elizabeth Gaskell was born Elizabeth Stevenson in 1810 in London and she's the daughter of a Unitarian minister. Her mother dies tragically a few months after her birth. So she is raised by an aunt in Cheshire and grows up in a small town there, which later becomes the inspiration for the village of Cranford in her writings. She marries a Unitarian minister herself, and his name is William Gaskell, and that wedding takes place in 1832. They move to Manchester, where he's working in a church there, and so it's a very big industrial northern city. They have 6 children together, 4 of whom are daughters who survive to adulthood. Her first work is Mary Barton, which comes out in 1848, and she follows this up with Cranford and with Ruth in the following years. She's also known particularly for being the first biographer of Charlotte Bronte, who was a friend of hers. She dies in Hampshire in the end in 1865. So she has a fairly quiet life. She's not out doing anything too extravagant or amazing. She's at home, she has a husband, she raises a family, and in between that she writes her books. Now her novels explore Victorian morality, and they also look at the class system, particularly the class divide between the upper classes and the working classes. And this is something that she would have witnessed herself during her time, particularly in Manchester, which was a big industrial city, lots of factory workers there at the time. In her lifetime, and for quite a few years beyond, she was viewed as a woman who was sometimes writing about stuff that the men didn't think she really knew enough about. She shouldn't be talking about cotton mills and etc. because she doesn't know enough about them and she'll just confuse people. However, her work had a bit of a resurgence around the 1950s, 1960s with the rise of a feminism movement that really saw her come back into the public eye and get some attention again. And her works can be seen as typical Victorian realism novels in some ways, but definitely with a focus, there's a strong focus on some of the women characters for certain, and also a strong focus on the class divide as relates to industry and Victorian industry. So the novels themselves, we'll just run through a few of the main ones. So we have Mary Barton, which came out in 1848. Cranford in 1851 to 53, because that one was serialised, as was the wont quite often in Victorian times. Ruth followed in 1853. North and South in 1854 to 55. Sylvia's Lovers in 1863. Wives and Daughters in 1865, and there were also numerous novellas and short stories, plus of course that biography of Charlotte Bronte I mentioned, which is called The Life of Charlotte Bronte, which came out in 1857, and it's a slightly condensed version of Charlotte Bronte's life in so far as anything that was slightly dubious was left out. Sanitised perhaps is the word we should use for it, but all the same it was written by someone who actually knew her, which does give it a lot of credence for the information that is included. So if you want to read Elizabeth Gaskell, where should you start? My recommendation would actually be with North and South. I think this is a really approachable novel. There have been some really good TV adaptations as well, if you're interested in TV adaptations. There was a very excellent one with Richard Armitage playing Mr. Thornton in North and South. Cranford has also been dramatised as a TV series, starring some big names such as Judi Dench, and a young Tom Hiddleston actually appeared in the second series. So if you're a Tom Hiddleston fan, you definitely want to check that out. And there's also been a good TV version of Wives and Daughters. Wives and Daughters is actually an unfinished novel. She was still writing it at the time of her death, and the published form we see today is just as far as she'd gotten, and there's kind of often a sort of ending's been put on in terms of how people think it was going to go, but it is an unfinished novel essentially. But definitely North and South. If you have never read any Elizabeth Gaskell, that's the one I'd pick. Really engaging characters, and it's pretty typical of her work in that it's looking at the treatment of the working classes in industrial Victorian North. So I will end there for today, but I look forward to seeing you all again very soon with another vlog. Bye for now.